We're with the Director of Integrative Medicine at Jefferson, and where that is Dr. Dan Monti. And Dr. Monti, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
We have been following up on the study, and you were actually the principal investigator, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you so much. And that study design was immaculate. It was wonderful. And we've talked to some of the other investigators rather, and I'd like to get your overview of the study and why this study is so important.
To begin, the study is so important because the intervention is so important. I've been in the mental health and medicine and integrative health and medicine worlds for over 20 years. And I've really never seen another intervention that is so effective and efficient at alleviating the distress of difficult or distressing events that people have had in their lives. Because a distressing event can cause emotional and physical symptoms for months, years, and as that time goes by, it's often difficult for people and therapists and practitioners to connect where that distress comes from. The intervention allows us to quickly and efficiently get to the root cause of some of these symptoms and the distress that is a result from those symptoms. And that's why the study has been really exciting for me. Designing it was something that I've thought about for years, because what was important for us to show was not only does the intervention, NET, effectively and efficiently alleviate the distress of a difficult event that somebody's experienced and result in improved quality of life and decreased symptoms, but we wanted to show that that actually has an effect on the brain.
You were talking about the distress. Is this a body distress, an emotional distress, a mind distress? When you talk about distress, can you elucidate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question because this is something that wasn't that well understood decades ago. Mm-hmm. But
that's right.
We now know that when people experience physical or emotional distress, whether it be an event that causes distress or an injury that causes distress to the physical body, that it's registered in the rest of the mind-body architecture. So there's always emotions and feelings associated with a stressor, whether it's a physical or an emotional stressor, and there's always physical symptoms associated with a stressor, whether or not it's a physical or emotional stressor.
And in this particular study, there's been case studies and other things that have been done, but in this particular study, there were some unique features to it, including the imaging. Can you elucidate on that?
The imaging shows that the brain continues to respond to a distressing event long after it's occurred. Mm-hmm. And that actually the brain can change its response with an appropriate intervention like NET. And I've really never seen an intervention do it like NET does it. And what's so great about the imaging component of this study is it clearly demonstrates that the brain changes. And these are people who've had these distressing events for a long, long time. The minimal entrance criteria was 6 months, but the average was 2-3 years. So people are walking around with this distressing event 2-3 years, which is clearly affecting the brain and clearly affecting the body. And that's what the study shows.
And so you can see the evidence of the distress in the brain imaging?
We can see the evidence of the distress in the brain imaging, and we can see the evidence of that distress in the body. And we captured both in this study, and that's what makes the study so exciting.
And what did you capture in the body? Besides the brain imaging, what did you capture in the body?
So when people have a distressing event that continues to cause them distress, that can be captured in the autonomic nervous system. And that's what we did in this study. So when people thought about their distressing event, the autonomic nervous system became aroused. And so if cues of that event are occurring, throughout the day, the week, the month, that means autonomic arousal is occurring, which chronically is bad for us. And so that was our cue that the body is experiencing the distress, and then we were able to visualize in the brain that the central nervous system was experiencing the distress. And the beautiful thing about the study is that after a very short period of time, both the brain and the body were different.
And in registering in the body, you took some blood and you did biofeedback and you had self-reports where the patient would actually subjectively say how they felt.
Right.
And then when the study was over, you took these different parts and they correlated time-wise. If I'm saying it right, you actually saw that they were correlated to the distressing subjective symptoms and then also the objective observations in the brain imaging and also the biofeedback in the body. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, at baseline, these people who've had this distressing event for a long, long time, when they think about the event, we were able to measure that the autonomic nervous system responded, and responded in a way that you don't want it to, that they subjectively felt distressed, that on valid measures of distress, they scored high, and that the brain reacted to that distress in a particular way that also is something we wouldn't want long term. After the intervention, 3 to 5 sessions, what we found is that the people were no longer responding physiologically. They didn't have the autonomic arousal that they had previously. Their subjective distress went away, or largely went away, and the brain changed, both at rest and in response to the distressing cues. This is huge, because those cues, and those cues are everywhere because something occurs when we've had a distressing event. We call it stimulus generalization. So little reminders, even if they're vague reminders of the distressing event, can consciously or non-consciously set off the whole pattern of reactivity physiologically in the brain and throughout the rest of the mind-body architecture. So that no longer is occurring for this person who's walking around with this distressing event.